Do you know what it feels like to be cut loose in just 7 minutes by people who have no idea how their own company survives that morning? They called my work legacy, as if my 14 years were just an old file waiting to be deleted. But the $78 million deal the CEO's son had been bragging about contained exactly one clause I had inserted myself. One single line, one signature, and the entire building goes dark. My name is Paisley Bennett. I am 39 years old, and for the last 14 years, I have been the regulatory and compliance lead at Granite Harbor Financial. To the fresh-faced developers drinking nitro cold brew in the break room, I am a relic. I am the woman in the corner office without windows who demands they fill out forms they do not understand. To the investors, I am a line item on a spreadsheet labeled administrative overhead. They are all wrong. I am the oxygen tank. They just do not realize they are underwater. The morning started the way it always did in our Charlotte headquarters. The air conditioning was humming too loudly, battling the humid North Carolina heat outside, while the interior of the office smelled of burnt Arabica beans and aggressive ambition. My desk was a fortress of paper, real paper. While the rest of Granite Harbor lived in the cloud, regulatory compliance lived in the physical world of wet ink and notarized stamps. I had 3 monitors glowing in front of me, each one screaming for attention. On the left screen, I was fighting a losing battle with the New York Department of Financial Services. They wanted clarification on our anti-money laundering protocols for the third quarter of 2 years ago. On the right screen, I was compiling a massive dossier for our payment processing partner, a stack of digital documents so dense it would make a junior lawyer weep. In the center, physically resting on my desk, was the money transmitter license renewal for the state of New Mexico. It was a tedious, miserable document that required absolute precision, one wrong checkbox, one missed signature, and our ability to move money in that state would vanish overnight. I took a sip of my black coffee. It was lukewarm. I did not care. My brain was already cataloging the deadlines. The surety bond for California needed to be increased by $500,000 before Friday. The background checks for the new board members were stalled because one of them had a 10-year-old DUI he tried to hide. I was the janitor of their secrets and the architect of their legitimacy. Then I heard the footsteps. They were distinct, heavy, confident, but lacking any real rhythm. It was the walk of someone who had never been told no. Dylan Kessler rounded the corner. He was the son of our CEO, Graham Kessler, and held the nebulous title of Chief Strategy Officer. Dylan was 32 going on 19. He was wearing a fleece vest that probably cost $300 and sneakers that looked like they had been designed by a cartoon character. He was holding an iced latte in one hand and his phone in the other. He stopped at my cubicle wall, leaning over it with a grin that showed too many teeth. "Morning, Paisley," he said. His voice was loud, projecting for an audience that wasn't there. "Still killing trees." "I see." I did not look up from the New Mexico application. State regulations require physical copies for the master file. "Dylan, you know this." He laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. "You are funny. You know, I was reading this article on TechCrunch this morning. There are AI models now that can scan regulatory code and auto-fill these forms in seconds. Literally seconds." I finally looked up. His eyes were empty, glazed over with the shine of unearned confidence. "An AI cannot be held criminally liable for perjury." "Dylan," I said, my voice flat, "I sign these. If they are wrong, I go to court, not a server." Right. "Accountability, the human touch," he said, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. "I'm just saying, Paisley, an AI could do your work in 5 minutes. We need to be lean. We need to be agile. This legacy stuff, it drags us down." He tapped the frame of my cubicle twice. Bang, bang, and walked away. 30 seconds later, a notification pinged on Slack. The sound cut through the low hum of the office like a gunshot. It was the general channel. Dylan had posted a meme. It was an image of a dinosaur staring at a meteor, with the caption, "Compliance team watching the future arrive." Beneath it, he had tagged the entire engineering team with a rocket ship emoji. I could hear snickers erupting from the open-plan seating area where the developers sat. They were laughing. They thought it was hilarious. The dinosaur. That was me. I did not type a reply. I did not report it to HR. Paige Holloway in HR was Dylan's former college sorority sister. Reporting him would be as effective as shouting into a hurricane. Instead, I minimized the window. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small, encrypted hard drive. I plugged it into my personal laptop, which sat disconnected from the company network on the far edge of my desk. I opened a spreadsheet. It was my private ledger. I typed the date. I typed the time. I typed the exact quote, "AI could do your work in 5 minutes." I noted the Slack message ID. I noted the witnesses. This was not petty. This was insurance. For 14 years, I had documented every corner cut, every risk ignored, and every insult swallowed. The file was thousands of rows long. It was the anatomy of a disaster waiting to happen. Across the room, Dylan was now standing on a chair. He did this when he wanted to feel tall. "Listen up." Everyone, he shouted. The office went quiet. I just got off the phone with the team at Redwood. The ink is drying. The Redwood payroll network deal is a go. Cheers erupted. People clapped. Someone popped a bottle of cheap champagne. $78 million. Dylan roared, holding his arms out like a preacher. 3 years. Exclusive integration. We are going to process payroll for their entire client base. We are going to the moon. People, I watched them celebrate. $78 million. It was enough money to save the company from the cash flow crisis they were trying to hide. It was enough to buy Graham a new boat and Dylan a new identity as a tech visionary. They had no idea that the Redwood deal sat on a foundation of sand. I turned back to my screens. I navigated to a secure folder on my personal drive. The folder was named simply, "If They Get Stupid." Inside, there was a copy of the master service agreement for the Redwood deal. I knew it better than the lawyers did, because I was the one who redlined the compliance addendum. Dylan had been so busy looking at the revenue share percentages that he had barely glanced at the operational requirements. He threw the contract at me 2 months ago and said, "Just make sure the boring stuff is legal." So I did. I scrolled to page 42, section 14, paragraph 3. The validity of this agreement is contingent upon the continued employment and direct oversight of the designated Key Compliance Authority, defined herein as the individual currently holding the qualifying individual credentials for the state licensure. I had written that sentence. I had defined Key Compliance Authority not as a role, but as a person holding the specific credentials. And in the state of North Carolina, and 41 other states where we operated, the license was not just granted to Granite Harbor Financial. It was granted to Granite Harbor Financial by and through its qualified individual, me. My name was on the surety bonds. My social security number was on the background checks filed with the state banking commissioners. My personal financial history was vetted annually to ensure I was fit to manage the flow of millions of dollars. Dylan thought compliance was a department. He thought it was a function, like marketing or sales, where you could swap one body for another and the machine kept running. He did not understand that in the world of regulated money transmission, compliance was not a department. It was a hostage situation, and I was the one holding the key. I closed the folder. The cheering was dying down. Dylan was high-fiving the lead engineer. He looked over at me again, catching my eye across the room. He gave me a thumbs up, dripping with sarcasm. I picked up my pen and went back to the New Mexico application. I carefully signed my name at the bottom of the affidavit. Paisley Bennett. The ink was black and permanent. Let them have their champagne. Let them have their memes. Let them believe that the $78 million was secured by their brilliance. I checked the time on my computer. It was 10:45 in the morning. The office was buzzing with the energy of victory. I felt a strange sense of calm. It was the calm of a demolition expert who knows exactly where the charges are set. They wanted to erase the legacy. They wanted to automate the dinosaur. They were about to learn that you cannot delete the person who owns the passwords to your survival. I saved my work. I ejected my personal hard drive and slipped it back into my purse. The air conditioner rattled again, a dying gasp of cold air. I took another sip of cold coffee. It tasted bitter. But right now, bitterness was the only thing that felt real. I was ready. The calendar notification appeared on my screen at exactly 10:58 in the morning. It was a sterile blue rectangle that popped up over my spreadsheet. The subject line was simply Update. The location was Conference Room B, the one we jokingly called the fishbowl because of its floor-to-ceiling glass walls. The time was set for 11:03. I stared at the timestamp. 11:03 is not a meeting time. 11 o'clock is a meeting time. 11:30 is a meeting time. 11:03 is a tactical maneuver. It is designed to minimize pre-meeting chatter, cut off the morning workflow, and ensure the deed is done before the lunch rush begins. It is a timestamp found in HR handbooks on how to execute a reduction in force with minimal disruption. They were firing me. I did not feel panic. I did not feel a surge of adrenaline. I felt a cold, clinical detachment, like a surgeon looking at an X-ray of a broken bone. I saved the New Mexico file. I closed the browser tab for the payment processor. I locked my station. I picked up my notebook, the physical one, bound in black leather, and my pen. The walk to Conference Room B took 45 seconds. The office was still buzzing with the dopamine high of Dylan's $78 million announcement. A junior analyst waved at me as I passed. I did not wave back. I focused on the sound of my heels on the polished concrete floor. Click, click, click. It was a countdown. When I opened the glass door, the air inside was 10 degrees colder than the rest of the office. They were already seated, arranged in a tableau that was almost comical in its predictability. Graham Kessler, the CEO, sat at the head of the table. He did not look up. He was scrolling through his phone, his thumb moving with a rhythmic, hypnotic swipe. He was avoiding eye contact. He always avoided eye contact when things got messy. To his right sat Dylan. He was leaning back in his Herman Miller chair, arms behind his head, radiating the smug satisfaction of a man who thinks he has just won a game of chess he does not actually know how to play. To the left was Paige Holloway, the head of HR. Paige was a nice woman who had been hired to plan office parties and manage benefits. She was not built for executions. Her smile was stretched so tight across her face it looked like it might snap. It was the smile of a flight attendant telling you the turbulence is normal while the engine is on fire. Paisley, Paige said. Her voice was an octave higher than usual. Please, have a seat. I sat. I placed my notebook on the table. I uncapped my pen. The sound of the cap clicking off was the loudest thing in the room. So, Paige began, looking down at a printed sheet of paper. Her hands were shaking slightly. As you know, Granite Harbor is moving into a new phase of growth. With the Redwood deal and the implementation of new technologies, we are looking at optimizing our operational structure. She paused. This was the part where I was supposed to ask what that meant. I remained silent. I looked at Graham. He was still looking at his phone. We are sunsetting certain legacy functions. Paige continued, reading the script verbatim. We are restructuring the compliance department to align with a more automated, tech-forward approach. Dylan could not wait any longer. The script was too slow for him. He dropped his hands to the table and leaned forward. You are being freed up. Paisley, Dylan said. He used the phrase like it was a gift. We are moving past the era of manual oversight. It is inefficient. We need speed. We need scale. And frankly, your salary is a heavy line item that does not generate revenue. I looked at him. I did not blink. I see. We have prepared a severance package, Paige said, sliding a thick envelope across the mahogany table. It includes 2 weeks of pay for every year of service, provided you sign the non-disparagement agreement. I did not touch the envelope. I did not look at the numbers. I knew the numbers would be fair. Graham was cowardly, but he was not cheap. He would pay to make the guilt go away. I have one question, I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. Graham finally stopped scrolling. He placed his phone face down on the table, though he still looked at a point somewhere over my left shoulder. Go ahead, Graham said. I turned my gaze to Dylan. Who will replace me as the signatory for the state money transmitter licenses? who will maintain the surety bonds and the authorization credentials for the banking partners. Dylan laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Paisley. Come on, he said, shaking his head. The vendor has a template for all of that. We bought the premium package. Legal will just sign whatever needs to be signed. Monica has a law degree. I think she can handle a few forms. A template. I repeated, yes, a template. It is plug and play. Dylan said, we are not reinventing the wheel here. I looked at Paige. She was biting her lip. She knew enough about the office workflow to know that Monica in legal spent most of her time reviewing marketing copy, not navigating state banking laws. The New Mexico license renewal is pending. I spoke slowly, enunciating every syllable. The periodic report for the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network is due in 12 days. If that report is not filed by a qualified individual, the clock resets on our ability to onboard new customers in 3 Western states. It is not a template. Dylan, it is a sworn statement of compliance. Paige flinched. Her eyes darted to Graham. Graham cleared his throat. We have a transition team. Paisley, we will figure it out. We have the resources. Resources are not credentials. I said, we are done here, Dylan said, his voice hardening. He did not like that I was not crying. He did not like that I was not begging. He wanted a scene. He wanted to be the alpha male dismissing the nagging schoolmarm. You can pack your personal effects. Your access to the system will be terminated in... He checked his watch. 15 minutes. I nodded. It was exactly as I had anticipated. I reached for my lanyard. I unclipped the plastic badge that had granted me access to this building for 14 years. It had my face on it from a decade ago. Younger, with less gray hair and more optimism. I placed the badge on the table. It made a soft clack against the wood. Then, I opened my black notebook. I wrote the date. November 13th. I wrote the time. 11:12 in the morning. I wrote the names of those present. Graham Kessler, Dylan Kessler, Paige Holloway. I wrote Dylan's answer. Vendor has a template. Legal will sign. What are you writing? Dylan asked, his eyes narrowing. Meeting minutes, I said. I closed the notebook. I capped my pen. I stood up. Good luck with the optimization, I said. I turned and walked out of the glass room. I did not look back. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could feel the confusion radiating from Paige and the annoyance radiating from Dylan. Graham, I assumed, had already picked up his phone again. I walked back to my desk. The office was still loud. The sales team was ringing a bell. Someone was laughing near the coffee machine. I did not format the hard drive. I did not delete the files. I did not shred the documents. I did not plant a logic bomb in the code or leave a nasty note on the server. That would be amateur. That would be illegal. That would give them a reason to sue me and a narrative to paint me as the villain. I did something far more dangerous. I simply stopped. I was the crutch that had been holding up a broken leg for 14 years. I was the structural beam that they mistook for wallpaper. They thought they were standing on solid ground, but they were standing on my shoulders. I packed my framed photo of my dog. I packed my favorite mug. I put my notebook in my bag. The countdown had not started when I walked out of the room. The countdown had started years ago. Today was just the day I stopped resetting the timer. I walked to the elevator. The doors opened with a cheerful chime. As I stepped in, I saw Dylan standing in the doorway of the conference room, watching me. He looked triumphant. He thought he had just cut dead weight. The doors closed, severing the sight of him. I was not the dead weight. I was the anchor. And without an anchor, the ship does not sail faster. It just drifts into the rocks. The address for Sutter Ridge Advisory was in a part of Charlotte where the buildings did not scream for attention. There were no glass towers trying to pierce the clouds, no neon signs, and certainly no ping-pong tables visible through the windows. It was a brick building, solid and quiet, nestled between a law firm that handled estate planning for old money and a private equity group that never gave interviews. I walked into the lobby. It smelled of lemon polish and silence. There was no receptionist, just a digital directory. I pressed the button for the third floor. Mara Sutter did not believe in open-concept offices. She believed that risk management required doors. When she left Granite Harbor 3 years ago, she had told Graham Kessler that he was running a casino, not a financial institution. Graham had laughed. Mara had cashed out her stock options and started her own boutique firm. She was the best risk officer I had ever known, and the only person in this city who understood that saying no was more profitable than saying yes. I knocked on her door. "It is open." Her voice came through, calm and commanding. I stepped inside. Mara was standing by the window, looking out at the tree-lined street. She turned. She was 50, sharp-featured, wearing a suit that cost more than Dylan's car. She did not smile, but her eyes softened when she saw the box of personal belongings in my hands. "So," Mara said, moving to her desk. "They finally did it. 7 minutes." I said. I set the box down on a leather chair and pulled a thick, stapled document from my bag. "It took them 7 minutes. Dylan." I confirmed. I handed her the document. It was 24 pages long. I had printed it just before the meeting, while Dylan was bragging about the Redwood deal. It was not confidential company data. I was too smart to steal proprietary code or client lists. It was a regulatory impact assessment. It was a map of every compliance dependency that was currently active, and exactly when each one would expire without my specific, person-bound credentials. Mara put on her reading glasses. She sat down and began to read. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic sound of pages turning. I watched her face. On page 4, her eyebrows lifted. On page 9, she reached for a pen and circled something. On page 17, she stopped, looked up at me, and then looked back down, shaking her head. 10 minutes later, she closed the document. She took off her glasses and placed them on top of the paper stack. "They are hanging by a thread," Mara said. It was not a question. "This list, the California surety bond, the New York transaction monitoring report, the New Mexico license renewal, Paisley, these are not just administrative tasks. These are operating conditions. They called it legacy work," I said, taking a seat opposite her. "Dylan said an AI could do it in 5 minutes. Mara let out a short, incredulous breath. "He thinks the state banking commissioner accepts algorithmic hallucinations as legal filings. He thinks compliance is a software patch." I corrected. "He fired me." Mara. "But he did not just fire the employee. He fired the designated signatory. As of 11 o'clock this morning, Granite Harbor has no authorized delegate for their money transmission activities in 12 states. They are effectively unlicensed. They just do not know it yet." Mara tapped her finger on the desk. She looked at the document again. "So, why are you here?" she asked. Her tone shifted. We were no longer friends commiserating. We were professionals negotiating. "You did not come here just to show me that the ship is sinking. You could have gone home and watched it on the news. I want them to understand." I said, "Understand what?" "That they were wrong, the value of the thing they mocked." I said, "I do not want money from a lawsuit. I do not want to fight them in court for wrongful termination. That is messy, and it takes years. I want the market to show them exactly what happens when you treat the law like a suggestion." I reached into my bag again. This time, I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a certificate of formation for a limited liability company, Bennett Compliance Systems. Mara read aloud. She looked at the filing date. 2 years ago, I knew this day would come. I said, "I established the entity when Dylan was promoted to Chief Strategy Officer. It is fully incorporated. I have professional liability insurance. I have a registered agent. It has been dormant, filing 0 return tax forms for 24 months. It is clean. It is ready." Mara leaned back, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. "You were waiting. I was preparing." I corrected. "Insurance, Mara, just like you taught me. And you want to bring this entity under the Sutter Ridge umbrella," she guessed. "I want to offer a specialized service," I said. "Crisis management for fintechs who have lost their regulatory standing. I want to build a compliance system that actually works, backed by your firm's reputation and my operational execution. And Granite Harbor is the first case study Granite Harbor is the trigger. I said, but there is one more thing you need to see. I pulled up a PDF on my tablet and slid it across the desk to her. It was the master agreement for the $78 million Redwood payroll network deal. I had highlighted a single paragraph on page 42. Read the definition of key compliance authority. I said. Mara read it. Her eyes widened. She read it again. Slower this time. Jesus, she whispered. This is specific. The individual currently holding the qualifying individual credentials. That is you. It is not a role description. It is a biological identity tie-in. I wrote it. I said, Redwood's legal team loved it. They wanted assurance that the person managing the risk was not some 20-year-old intern. They wanted a veteran. So I gave them the clause. I made myself the structural load-bearing wall of the entire contract. Does Dylan know Dylan thinks it is standard boilerplate? I said. He was too busy calculating his commission to read the definitions. Mara looked at me, and for the first time, she smiled. It was a shark's smile. It was the smile of someone who sees the trap snapping shut before the prey even smells the bait. So, Mara said, putting the tablet down, if you are gone, they are in breach of the Redwood contract immediately, and if they are in breach, Redwood can walk away without penalty. Correct, I said, and Redwood will need a new partner, a partner who can demonstrate immediate, verified compliance capacity. Us, Mara said. Us, I agreed. Mara stood up and walked over to a side table where a coffee machine sat. It was a sleek, Italian machine that probably cost more than my first car. She brewed 2 espressos, the room filled with the rich, dark scent of coffee, erasing the sterile lemon smell of the lobby. She handed me a cup. The ceramic was warm in my hands. We do not have to do anything, do we? Mara asked. We do not have to make a phone call. We do not have to leak a story to the press. No, I said. We just have to wait. The deadlines are set. The clock is ticking. The systems will flag the missing credentials automatically. The state agencies will send the notices. Redwood will ask for the verification documents before the final sign-off. And when they ask, Mara said, there will be no one there to answer, just an empty desk and a template. I said. Mara held up her cup. To gravity. I clinked my cup against hers. To gravity. We drank. The espresso was strong, bitter, and perfect. There was no joy in this. Not really. It was a somber affair. I had given 14 years of my life to that company. I had built its safety nets. I had kept the wolves at the door. To watch it fall would be like watching a house I built burn down because the new owners decided smoke detectors were ugly. But they had made their choice. They chose the flash over the substance. They chose the sun over the expert. They chose the lie over the truth. How long do you think we have? Mara asked. Sitting back down at her desk, the Redwood due diligence team will ask for the final credential packet within 48 hours. I said, Dylan will try to stall. He will try to fake it. But by Friday, the first state regulator will issue a cease and desist for the lack of a qualified individual. By Monday, the payment rails will start to reject batches. Monday, Mara mused. That gives us the weekend to get your LLC fully operational within our vendor system. I can have the website live in an hour. I said, the paperwork is already in your inbox. Mara looked at her computer screen. She clicked the mouse once. Received. She said, Welcome to Sutter Ridge. Paisley. I looked out the window. Down on the street. People were walking. Cars were driving. Life was moving forward. Somewhere, a few miles away. Dylan was probably ordering lunch for the office, putting it on the corporate card, telling everyone that the future was bright. He was walking on air, completely unaware that I had just removed the ground. Thank you, Mara. I said. Do not thank me, she replied, already opening the file I had sent. You are the one bringing the $78 million opportunity with you. We are just the safe harbor. She was right. I wasn't just a fired employee looking for a job. I was a walking, breathing regulatory monopoly. And Granite Harbor was about to learn that you cannot automate integrity. While I was sitting in the quiet, sunlit office of Sutter Ridge Advisory, sipping espresso and watching my new future take shape, a very different scene was unfolding 3 miles away. I know the details of this meeting not because I was there, but because I know the players. I know the rhythm of the room, and later, when the depositions were filed and the internal chat logs were subpoenaed, the picture became as clear as a high-definition photograph. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. This was the time for the weekly operations sync, a ritual I had attended for 14 years. Usually, this meeting began with a review of outstanding risk factors, but today, the agenda had changed. Today, the agenda was victory. Dylan Kessler stood at the head of the conference table. The projector hummed above him, casting a glow onto the screen that made his teeth look unnaturally white. He had abandoned the traditional spreadsheets we used to track regulatory exposure. Instead, he had pulled up a slide deck that looked less like a financial report and more like a pitch for a lifestyle brand. The first slide featured a single word in a sans serif font, unshackled. Compliance, Dylan announced, pacing the length of the room, has historically been a bottleneck. It has been a department of no. It has been a room where momentum goes to die. He clicked a remote in his hand. The slide changed. It now showed a stock photo of a diverse group of young professionals high-fiving in a well-lit loft. As of 11 this morning, that era is over, Dylan continued. We are moving to a model I like to call frictionless governance. Compliance is no longer a department. People, it is a click. Around the table, the reactions were mixed. The product managers looked relieved. They had always hated waiting for my approval on new feature rollouts. The sales team looked ecstatic, but at the far end of the table, Monica Reyes, the general counsel, was not smiling. She was staring at the screen with a furrowed brow. Dylan clicked again. I want to introduce you to our new partner, Juris AI. The screen displayed a dashboard. It was beautiful, I will admit. It had heat maps. It had spinning globes. It had green bars that filled up to 100%. It was a masterpiece of user interface design. It was also completely hollow. This system, Dylan said, pointing a laser at the spinning globe, uses AI-enabled jurisdiction matching to instantly verify our footprint. No more paper forms. No more waiting for Paisley to read the fine print. We upload the transaction data, the AI matches it to the state laws, and boom, green light. Dylan, Monica Reyes spoke up. Her voice was tentative. She was a good corporate lawyer, excellent at drafting employment contracts and reviewing vendor agreements, but she knew as well as I did that she was out of her depth with state banking regulations. Does this system actually file the reports? It prepares them, Dylan said, waving his hand dismissively. It generates the PDF. We just have to sign. Okay, Monica said, tapping her pen on her notebook. But who signs? Has there been a handover from Paisley? Did she leave the access tokens for the state portals? Dylan stopped pacing. He looked at Monica with a mix of pity and annoyance. Monica, Paisley is out. She is gone. We do not need her tokens. We have the admin keys. It is resetting everything as we speak. But the bonds, Monica pressed. The bonds are in her name. The money transmitter licenses are tied to her specific credentials as the qualified individual. We cannot just swap a login. We have to refile the applications. Dylan laughed. It was the same laugh he had used when he told me an AI could do my job. You are overthinking it, he said. It is just paperwork. Monica, the state does not care whose name is on the bottom as long as the check clears. We are Granite Harbor. We are a $78 million company. They are not going to shut us down over a clerical detail. A young analyst raised his hand. He was new, maybe 6 months out of college. He had spent a few weeks shadowing me earlier in the year to learn the data entry protocols. Actually, Dylan, the analyst said, his voice cracking slightly. I think the New Mexico license specifically states that the credentials are person-bound. If the person leaves, we have a statutory obligation to notify the state within 5 business days, or the license is automatically suspended. The room went quiet. Dylan stared at the analyst. He did not look angry. He looked bored. What is your name again? Dylan asked. Kevin, the analyst said. Well, Kevin, Dylan said, flashing a tight smile. I appreciate the initiative, but you are thinking like the old Granite Harbor. You are thinking about obstacles. I need you to think about velocity. We have a vendor. The vendor says it is handled. Trust the technology. He clicked the remote again. The dashboard on the screen spun, showing a flurry of green check marks. Look at that, Dylan said. Green across the board. The system says we are compliant, so we are compliant. It was a dashboard of lies. The software he was showing them was a passive monitoring tool. It scraped public websites to see if laws had changed. It did not connect to our internal ledgers. It did not talk to the state databases. It was a weather map, but Dylan thought it was a steering wheel. Suddenly, a notification popped up on the projection screen. Dylan had forgotten to turn off his email notifications. It was a message from Evelyn Hart at Redwood Payroll Network. The subject line read, Pre-closing compliance verification, urgent. The preview of the message was visible to everyone in the room. Dylan, please provide the current certificate of good standing and the attestation of the key compliance authority for the final diligence packet. We need this before legal can release the countersigned contract. Boom, Dylan said, pointing at the notification. They want the paperwork. See? It is happening. He tabbed out of the presentation and opened the email right there on the main screen. He hit forward. He typed Monica's name in the recipient field. Monica, Dylan said as he typed. Get the dashboard to print out a certificate. Put the company seal on it. Make it look official. PDF it and send it over. Monica stared at him. Dylan, I cannot just PDF something to make it look official. That is fraud. It is not fraud. Monica, Dylan snapped. It is a placeholder. We are compliant. The system says we are green. Just give them the piece of paper they need to feel good, so we can book the revenue. We will clean up the filings next week. Monica looked down at her notebook. She did not argue further, but I know that at that exact moment, she made a mental note to update her resume on LinkedIn as soon as she got back to her desk. At the other end of the table, Caleb Voss, the CFO, had been silent the entire meeting. Caleb was a man who lived and died by the quarterly audit. He knew that revenue could not be recognized if the contract contingencies were not met. He looked at Dylan. Then he looked at the meaningless green dashboard. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to ask about the liability insurance, but then he closed it. He had a mortgage. He had 2 kids in private school, and he had seen what happened to me just 3 hours ago. Silence is the sound of a company dying. Dylan hit send. The email whooshed away, carrying with it a directive that would become Exhibit A in a future investigation. Great meeting. Everyone, Dylan said, clapping his hands. Compliance is solved. Now, let's talk about the launch party. As they filed out of the room, joking about the open bar menu for Friday, a silent tragedy was occurring in the server room 2 floors below. For 14 years, I had maintained a sophisticated system of calendar alerts and automated triggers. They were tied to my user profile. Every Tuesday at 4 p.m, my account would ping the central server to run a script. This script checked the expiration dates on our 50 state licenses. It checked the transaction volume against the bond limits. It checked the background check refresh dates for the board members. If any metric was close to the red line, the system would scream. It would send high-priority emails to the entire executive team. It would flash red warnings on the operations dashboard. It was the heartbeat of the company's survival instinct. But at 11:15 that morning, the IT director, following Dylan's orders, had disabled the account P. Bennett. The account was locked. The user was inactive. So, when 4 o'clock arrived, the script tried to run. It pinged the server. The server checked the authorization. Access denied. The script tried again. Access denied. After 3 attempts, the script terminated. There was no alarm. There was no flashing red light. There was no email to Caleb Voss warning him that the California bond was underfunded by $600,000. There was no notification to Monica Reyes that the New Mexico license window was closing in 11 days. The system did not fail. The system did exactly what it was told. It shut up. Dylan Kessler believed he had automated compliance. He believed he had purchased a future where he did not have to listen to a middle-aged woman tell him what he could not do. He thought the dashboard with the pretty green lights was the truth. He did not understand that the green lights were not indicators of safety. They were just the last image frozen on the screen before the power cord was pulled. Back in the conference room, the projector finally went into sleep mode. The room went dark. The ghost of my legacy was gone, replaced by a vacuum of competence. They were flying a plane at 30,000 feet, and the pilot had just turned off the altimeter because he found the beeping noise annoying. They were already crashing. They just had not hit the ground yet. The video conference with Redwood Payroll Network began at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning. I was not there, of course. I was 3 miles away in a borrowed office, organizing my new business cards. But I knew the room where they sat. I knew the lighting, which was always too harsh for video calls. I knew the acoustics, which made everyone sound slightly more desperate than they intended. And most of all, I knew the people. I could reconstruct the scene with the fidelity of a court stenographer. Dylan Kessler sat at the head of the table, wearing a blazer over a t-shirt, the uniform of the modern tech visionary who wants you to know he is too busy for a tie. To his right was Graham, the CEO, who likely had his hands folded on the table to hide a tremor. To his left was Caleb Voss, the CFO, who was there to count the money before it arrived. Monica Reyes sat at the far end, clutching a notepad like a shield. On the massive screen in front of them was the team from Redwood. They were not in a glass box in Charlotte. They were in a mahogany-paneled boardroom in Chicago. Sitting in the center of the frame was Evelyn Hart, the Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. I had met Evelyn once, 3 years ago, at a compliance summit in DRC. She was a woman who did not believe in small talk. She wore reading glasses on a chain, and she read contracts the way a priest reads the Bible, with absolute reverence and a fear of damnation. Dylan opened the call with the energy of a game show host. "Good morning, everyone," Dylan said, his voice booming. "We are incredibly excited to kick this off. The synergy between Granite Harbor and Redwood is going to be redefining. We are talking about total embedded finance. We are talking about friction-free scaling." He launched into his pitch. It was a word salad of buzzwords he had picked up from podcasts. He spoke about vertical integration. He spoke about the API economy. He spoke about capturing the millennial market. He used the word robust 4 times in 3 minutes. Evelyn Hart watched him from the screen. She did not smile. She did not nod. Her face was a mask of polite patience. She let him talk for 5 minutes. She let him finish his slide about the exponential growth trajectory. Then, she leaned forward. "Dylan," Evelyn said. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the room like a cold draft. "The marketing deck is impressive. But we are past the vision stage. We are in the execution phase. I have the wire transfer authorization for the initial tranche of funding sitting on my desk." Dylan beamed. "That is music to my ears. Evelyn, we are ready to receive." "Excellent," Evelyn said. "However, before I can release the funds, my legal team has flagged a missing item in the final diligence packet. We received a generic certificate from your general counsel this morning, but it lacks the specific attestation we require." Dylan waved his hand. "Oh, that. We are transitioning to a new automated system. It is much more efficient. The certificate Monica sent is generated directly from our live dashboard." Evelyn adjusted her glasses. "I am not asking about the dashboard. Dylan, I am asking about the signatory." "The signatory?" Dylan asked, his smile faltering slightly. "The money transmitter licenses in New Mexico, California, and New York." Evelyn listed them without looking at a note. "They are conditioned upon a specific qualified individual. The surety bonds are underwritten based on the personal financial and professional history of that individual. My question is simple. Who is the compliance authority currently named on those licenses?" Dylan laughed nervously. He looked at Graham, but Graham was studying the grain of the wood on the table. "Well, as I said, we have a system now," Dylan said. It handles the jurisdiction matching. It is AI-enabled. It removes the need for a single point of failure. Dylan, Evelyn said. She did not raise her voice. I am going to ask you one more time. I do not want to hear about the system. I want a name. Who is the human being legally responsible for the compliance of $78 million of flow? The silence in the room was heavy. It was the kind of silence that has physical weight. Dylan turned to Monica. His eyes were wide, silently pleading with her to fix it. Say something. His eyes said, lie. Monica Reyes looked at the camera. She looked at Evelyn Hart. Monica was a lawyer. She knew that lying to a strategic partner during a closing call could be construed as wire fraud. She valued her license to practice law more than she valued Dylan's approval. Currently, Monica said, her voice tight. The licenses are still under the name of Paisley Bennett. Evelyn nodded slowly. Paisley Bennett. Yes, I recall her resume. 15 years of experience, clean record. She was the one who drafted the risk protocols in the agreement. Right, Dylan interjected, trying to regain control. But Paisley is no longer with the organization. We have parted ways to optimize our structure. We are in the process of updating the files. You parted ways, Evelyn repeated. It was not a question. Yesterday, Dylan said. But like I said, it is just a clerical update. We just need to swap the names on the forms. The system is already handling the back end. Evelyn took her glasses off. She placed them on the table in Chicago. The sound was audible over the speakers. Clerical, she said. The word dripped with disdain. You think the person who holds the penal liability for money laundering laws is a clerical detail. We have a deep bench, Dylan insisted. We have resources. Who is the new qualified individual? Evelyn asked. Who has been vetted by the state banking commissioners? Who has passed the FBI background check for this specific role? Who has the bond underwriting in place as of this morning? We are finalizing that, Dylan said. Legal will sign in the interim. Legal cannot sign, Evelyn said. Your general counsel is not the named individual on the bond. If you operate for 1 hour without a valid qualified individual, you are operating an unlicensed money transmission business. That is a federal crime. Dylan, Caleb Voss, the CFO, finally looked up. His face was pale. He was looking at Dylan like he was watching a car crash in slow motion. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that the money was not just delayed. The money was evaporating. Evelyn, please, Dylan said, his voice taking on a whine. We are talking about a few days of paperwork. Do not let bureaucracy stand in the way of a $78 million partnership. We can sign a side letter. We can indemnify you. Evelyn picked up a document from her desk. I knew exactly what it was. It was the contract I had redlined. Page 42, Evelyn said. Paragraph 14. The definition of key compliance authority. I am reading it now. The validity of this agreement is contingent upon the continued employment and direct oversight of the designated key compliance authority. It goes on to state that any change in this authority must be communicated and approved in writing 30 days prior to the change. She looked directly into the camera lens. It felt like she was looking into Dylan's soul, assuming he had one. You fired the key compliance authority yesterday, Evelyn stated. You did not notify us. You do not have a replacement approved by the state. You do not have a replacement approved by us. You are in breach of contract. Dylan, we can fix this, Dylan stammered. We can hire someone. We can get Paisley back if that is what you want. I can call her right now. That is not how this works, Evelyn said. You cannot treat compliance like a light switch that you flick on and off. You have demonstrated a fundamental lack of understanding of the regulatory environment. That is a material adverse change in our risk assessment. Evelyn, Graham Kessler spoke for the first time. His voice was raspy. We have been partners for a long time. We have been partners with a compliant entity, Evelyn corrected. Right now, I am looking at a liability. She stacked the papers on her desk. I am placing the funding on hold, Evelyn said. You cannot do that, Dylan shouted. He stood up. We have a signed deal. We have a conditional deal, Evelyn replied calmly. And the condition has not been met. I need proof. Dylan, I do not want slides. I do not want AI dashboards. I want a stamped, notarized filing from the state of New Mexico and the state of New York showing a valid, active, qualified individual who is currently employed by Granite Harbor. Give us a week, Dylan begged. I will give you 48 hours, Evelyn said. If I do not have proof of valid regulatory standing by Friday at noon, I am triggering the termination clause for cause. 48 hours, Dylan choked. That is impossible. The state takes weeks to process a new applicant. Then I suggest you should not have fired the old applicant yesterday, Evelyn said. The screen went black. She did not say goodbye. She simply ended the call. In the conference room in Charlotte, the silence returned. But this time it was different. It was the silence of a vacuum. Dylan stood there, his hand still raised in a gesture of protest. The slide deck behind him was still looping, showing the word unshackled in bold. Triumphant letters. Caleb Voss slowly closed his laptop. The burn rate, Caleb said softly, talking to no one in particular. Without that wire transfer, we miss payroll in 3 weeks. It is fine, Dylan snapped, though his voice was shaking. I will call the governor's office. I have connections. We will rush the filing, or we will just pay Paisley a consulting fee to sign the papers. Everyone has a price. He pulled out his phone. He dialed my number. I watched my phone buzz on the desk in Mara Sutter's office. The screen lit up with the name Dylan Kessler. I did not pick up. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it went to voicemail. Back in the conference room, Monica Reyes stood up. She gathered her notepad. I need to go, Monica said. Where are you going? Dylan demanded. We need to fix this. I am going to document this meeting, Monica said. And then I am going to call my malpractice insurer. She walked out. A moment later, a sound echoed through the room. It was the notification sound of an incoming email on the main projection screen. It was the follow-up from Redwood. The subject line was in all capital letters. It was stark against the white background of the projection. Proof required within 48 hours. Dylan stared at it. The $78 million was right there, trapped behind a glass wall of his own making, and he had thrown away the only key. The first domino fell at 1:42 in the afternoon on Wednesday. It did not make a sound. It was just a line of red text in a server log that nobody was watching because the person who usually watched it had been escorted out of the building 26 hours earlier. The error originated from our primary payment rail provider, a massive clearinghouse in Atlanta that processed our automated clearinghouse batches. Every day at this time, Granite Harbor transmitted a file containing thousands of payroll instructions for our mid-sized clients, and every day, for 14 years, that file was accompanied by a digital certificate. That certificate was a cryptographic handshake. It said, "This money is clean, this sender is verified, and the person responsible for this transaction is Paisley Bennett." Today, the handshake failed. The server at the clearinghouse queried our system. It looked for the active credentials of the qualified individual. It found a locked account. It found a revoked security token. The clearinghouse server did exactly what it was programmed to do. It rejected the entire batch. At 2:15, the phone lines in the customer support center began to light up. It started with a construction company in Ohio. Their payroll had not landed. Then a logistics firm in Texas, then a restaurant chain in Florida. I can imagine the scene on the sales floor. The 20-something account managers, who had been popping champagne yesterday, were now staring at their headsets in confusion. They checked the internal dashboard, Dylan's beautiful, green, AI-enabled dashboard. It still showed everything as operational. It was lying to them because it was only reading the surface, not the plumbing. It is just a glitch, they told the angry clients. We are looking into it. But it was not a glitch. It was a blockade. At 3 o'clock, the second domino fell. This one came in the form of an email to the general compliance inbox, which was now being forwarded to a confused junior paralegal. It was a notification from the Washington State Department of Financial Institutions. The subject line was administrative and terrifying, notice of deficiency, authorized delegate status. The body of the email was brief. Their automated audit system had flagged that the surety bond on file for Granite Harbor was attached to a licensed individual who was no longer listed in the National Employment Database for the company. The state system operates on a simple logic: no person, no license. The email stated that Granite Harbor was being placed in pending review status. This is the regulatory equivalent of a medically induced coma. Until the status was resolved, we were legally prohibited from onboarding new customers in Washington. Dylan was in his office when the news hit him. He was trying to call the governor's nephew, trying to pull strings that did not exist. The junior paralegal ran in, holding the printout of the notice. "Dylan," she said, her voice shaking, "Washington just flagged us. They say we have no authorized signatory on record." "Send them the template," Dylan shouted. He was sweating now. The confident strategist was gone, replaced by a frightened child who had broken a vase. "Send them the PDF Monica made." "We cannot," the paralegal said. "I tried to upload it to the portal. The portal rejected it. It says the social security number on the form does not match the historical record of the licensee." Of course it did not match. Monica had used the company's tax ID number, but the state did not want a tax ID. They wanted a person. They wanted me. At 3:45, Monica Reyes made her move. She had spent the last 2 hours on the phone with the company's outside malpractice counsel. I can only guess what they told her. But I know Monica. She was risk-averse. She knew that if she knowingly allowed the company to operate without a license while lying to a strategic partner like Redwood, she could be disbarred. She could go to prison. She walked into Dylan's office. She did not knock. Dylan was on the phone with the IT director, screaming about overriding the security protocols. "Just hack it if you have to," Dylan was yelling. "Force the batch through." Monica walked up to his desk. She placed her company laptop on the surface. Next to it, she placed her badge. And finally, she placed a single sheet of paper. "What is this?" Dylan snapped, covering the phone mouthpiece. "I am busy, Monica." "I am resigning," Monica said. "Effective immediately." Dylan stared at her. "You cannot resign. We are in a crisis. We have 48 hours to fix the Redwood deal." "There is no fixing this." "Dylan," Monica said. Her voice was ice cold. "I looked through the archives. I found the emails Paisley sent you 6 months ago. She warned you about the person-bound credentials. She warned you that the API keys were tied to her biometric identity. You replied with a thumbs-up emoji." "So what?" Dylan said. "We will figure it out. I am not going to be the lawyer on record when the cease and desist orders start arriving." Monica said, "I have a family. I am done." She turned and walked out. She did not go back to her office to pack. She just walked to the elevator and left. The legal department of Granite Harbor was now an empty room. The legal vacuum created a sudden, violent implosion. Without a general counsel, the junior staff froze. Nobody would sign anything. The HR director, Paige, locked herself in her office. The operations team stopped answering phones. At 4:30, Caleb Voss walked into Dylan's office. Caleb looked 10 years older than he had that morning. He was holding a tablet. "Redwood just updated the shared ledger," Caleb said. "Did they release the funds?" Dylan asked, hope surging in his voice. "Did they accept the delay?" "No," Caleb said. "They placed a global hold on all integrated accounts." "What does that mean?" "It means," Caleb said, his voice trembling, "that they did not just stop the new deal. They flagged our existing merchant accounts as high risk because we share a backend with them for the legacy clients. Their system automatically triggered a fraud alert to our other banking partners." This was the twist that Dylan had never seen coming. The financial world is small. It is incestuous. Everyone talks to everyone. When a giant like Redwood Payroll Network flags a partner for compliance irregularities, the other banks notice. "Wells Fargo just paused our operating line of credit," Caleb continued. "Silicon Valley Bank just put a freeze on the vendor payable account. They are all asking for the same thing." "Dylan," They want the current attestation of compliance signed by the qualified individual. Dylan sank into his chair. The room was spinning. It is just a signature, Dylan whispered. It is just ink on paper. It is trust, Caleb said. And we lost it. Caleb looked out the window at the skyline of Charlotte. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the city. Paisley told us, Caleb said softly. I remember the meeting last year, she said. If you cut the safety net to save money on nylon, do not be surprised when you hit the concrete. We laughed at her. We said she was being dramatic. She planned this, Dylan hissed. She sabotaged us. She did not sabotage anything, Caleb said. She just left. We are the ones who drove the car off the cliff. She just refused to be in the passenger seat when we did it. The office outside was descending into chaos. The sales team was shouting at the support team. The developers were arguing with the product managers. The green dashboard on the wall was finally starting to turn red, section by section, as the external systems rejected our connections one by one. Payment failure, license suspended, credit line frozen, partner hold. Dylan looked at his phone. He looked at my contact information. He had called me 5 times. I had not answered. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. He took a deep breath. He still did not get it. He still thought this was a business problem. He thought this was a negotiation. I will get her back, Dylan said. He stood up, adjusting his blazer. I will go to her house. I will offer her double her salary. I will offer her equity. Everyone has a number. Caleb, she is just holding out for a better deal. Dylan, Caleb warned. Do not do that. She wants to feel important, Dylan said, grabbing his car keys. So I will go make her feel important. I will bring her back by tomorrow morning, and she will sign the papers, and Redwood will release the money. You will see. He stormed out of the office. He walked past the panicked employees, past the ringing phones, past the red warning lights. He walked with the desperate swagger of a gambler who is about to put his last chip on a number that has already lost. He thought he could buy the signature. He did not understand that the signature was not for sale. The signature was the seal of a reputation he had already destroyed. I was not at home. I was sitting in the conference room at Sutter Ridge, watching the news on a muted TV. But I could feel the vibrations of the collapse. I could feel the frantic energy radiating from the building I had left. The dominoes were all down. The kinetic energy was spent. Now, there was only the silence of the wreckage, and Dylan was coming to find me, bringing his checkbook to a gunfight. The sun was beginning to set over Charlotte, casting long, bruised shadows across the city, at Granite Harbor. I imagined the artificial lights were blazing, fighting against the encroaching dark. But for Dylan Kessler, the darkness had already arrived. It lived in his phone. At 5:15 in the afternoon, Dylan tried to call me for the 6th time. He did not hear a ringtone. He did not hear a voicemail greeting. Instead, he heard the 3-tone disconnect signal, followed by a computerized voice that was as indifferent as the universe itself. The number you have reached is no longer in service. Please check the number and try your call again. He likely stared at the screen, baffled. He assumed I was playing games. He assumed I was screening his calls to drive up my price. He did not understand that I had ported my personal number to a secure VoIP service managed by Sutter Ridge 2 hours ago. My old life was not just closed. It was disconnected. He tried to email me next. He likely typed out a message that oscillated between apology and accusation. Paisley, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand. Let's be reasonable. He hit send. 3 seconds later, the exchange server spat it back at him. Delivery status, notification, failure. Recipient not found. I had not just blocked him, I had deleted the email address he knew. I was a ghost, and you cannot negotiate with a ghost. Inside the glass-walled executive suite of Granite Harbor, the atmosphere had shifted from arrogance to a primal panic. Graham Kessler, the CEO who usually limited his vocabulary to words like synergy and vision, was now speaking a new language. It was the language of survival. I do not care what it costs, Graham reportedly shouted. slamming his hand on the mahogany table. Get her back. Offer her a 50% raise. Offer her a seat on the board. Just get her in this room and get a pen in her hand. But they could not get me in the room because they could not find me. They called my emergency contact, but that was my sister in Oregon, and she had been instructed to block all unknown numbers. They thought about sending a courier to my apartment, but I had already moved to a temporary corporate suite provided by Mara. So, they did what desperate corporate men always do. They hired expensive lawyers. By 6 o'clock, a team from a top-tier crisis management firm had arrived. These were men in $3,000 suits who specialized in cleaning up spills. They sat around the table with Graham and Dylan, looking at the mess. "We need an emergency refile," Dylan told them, his voice hoarse. "We need to put a new name on the license. Just swap it out. We will pay the expedited fee." The lead attorney, a man named Sterling, who had seen this scenario a dozen times, shook his head slowly. "Mr. Kessler," Sterling said, his voice calm and patronizing, "there is no such thing as an emergency refile for a money transmitter license. This is not a parking permit. This is a state-granted privilege to move funds. The application requires fingerprint cards. It requires an FBI background check. It requires a credit history review. It requires a personal financial statement audit." "How long?" Graham asked. "In a best-case scenario," Sterling said, checking his notes, "assuming you have a perfectly qualified candidate ready to go today, the state of New York takes 90 days to approve a change of control. California takes 6 months. We have 48 hours, Dylan whispered. "Then you do not have 48 hours, Sterling said. "You have a shutdown." Dylan stood up and paced the room. He could not accept the math. He was used to a world where he could code his way around a problem, where he could A/B test a solution until it worked, but the law is not code. You cannot iterate the law. "It is the vendor's fault," Dylan snapped, looking for a scapegoat. "Their system said we were compliant. We should sue them." "The vendor provided a tool," Sterling corrected him. "You provided the emptiness." "Then it is it," Dylan said. "They locked her account too fast. If the account was still active, the alerts would have—" "Dylan," Graham said. It was the first time in years he had spoken to his son without pride. "Stop." "But who signs?" Dylan asked, his voice cracking. "Who signs the paper for Redwood tomorrow?" "Someone has to sign." "Nobody signs," Sterling said, "because nobody here is allowed to." While they were suffocating in their glass box, I was sitting in the climate-controlled silence of Sutter Ridge Advisory. I had 3 monitors in front of me. I was not looking at Granite Harbor's internal Slack. I did not need to. I was looking at the public truth. On the left screen, I had the NMLS Consumer Access Portal open. It is a public database. Anyone can look at it. I watched as the status for Granite Harbor Financial changed from active to pending deficiencies in 3 more states. It was like watching lights go out on a map. On the right screen, I had a Google alert feed. It was starting to populate. A fintech blog had picked up the chatter about the payment failures. Granite Harbor users report delays. A thread on Reddit was growing, with small business owners asking if the company was insolvent. I did not smile. I did not feel a rush of vindictive joy. I felt the cold satisfaction of a structural engineer watching a bridge collapse exactly how she predicted it would. I was not destroying them. I was simply observing gravity. Mara walked into the office. She was holding a tablet. She looked serious, but there was a glint in her eye that I recognized. It was the look of a hunter who sees the prey walk into the trap. "You need to see this," Mara said. She handed me the tablet. It was an email. The sender was Evelyn Hart at Redwood Payroll Network. The recipient was Mara Sutter. Mara. The email read, "I hope this note finds you well. We are currently encountering a significant compliance continuity issue with a partner in the Charlotte area. We are looking for immediate advisory support to mitigate risk. More importantly, we are exploring alternative infrastructure options. Does Sutter Ridge currently represent any entities with active, person-bound credentialing capacity for multi-state money transmission? We have a deal that needs a home, and the current house is on fire." I read it twice. This was the twist they never saw coming. Dylan thought I was trying to burn the company down to teach him a lesson. He thought I was an arsonist. He was wrong. I was not an arsonist. I was an architect. I was not trying to destroy the $78 million deal. I was saving it. I was just moving it to a place where it would be treated with respect. She is asking for a lifeboat, I said to Mara. She is asking for you, Mara corrected. She knows you are not there. She knows I am the only person you would talk to. She is connecting the dots. If we reply, I said, thinking through the chessboard, and we tell them that Bennett Compliance Systems is ready to operate, Redwood will drop Granite Harbor before the 48 hours are up. They will drop them for cause, Mara said. Breach of contract, gross negligence. Granite Harbor gets 0. You get the contract. I stood up and walked to the window. Below me, the city lights were blurring in the evening haze. I thought about the 14 years I had spent at that desk. I thought about the weekends I worked while Dylan was at festivals. I thought about the sheer volume of mistakes I had quietly fixed so that Graham could sleep at night. They had treated me like a utility, like electricity. You only notice it when it is gone. I do not want to just email her, I said, turning back to Mara. I want to finish this properly. What do you mean? Mara asked. They are going to call a meeting, I said. Redwood will demand a face-to-face to explain the failure. They will summon Graham and Dylan to beg for their lives, and they will ask for a solution. And you want to be the solution, Mara said. I want them to see it, I said. I want Dylan to look me in the eye when he realizes that he did not fire a legacy employee. He fired his own future. Mara nodded. She tapped the screen of the tablet. I will reply to Evelyn, Mara said. I will tell her that Sutter Ridge has a solution, and we can present it tomorrow. But we will not go to Redwood's office. We will go to Granite Harbor. We will make them host their own funeral. Make sure Graham is there, I said. Oh, he will be, Mara promised. He is desperate enough to meet with the devil right now. He just does not realize the devil is the only one who followed the rules. My phone buzzed again. It was a text message to my new number. Only Mara knew this number. It was from Evelyn Hart. Mara must have passed it along instantly. Can you deliver the text read? 2 words. I typed back. I wrote the clause. I own the credentials. I am ready. I put the phone down. Across town, Dylan was probably screaming at a junior developer to hack the state database. He was running around looking for a fire extinguisher. He did not realize that the fire was not the problem. The problem was that he had built his house out of gasoline. Get your suit ready, Mara said, walking to the door. Tomorrow morning, we go to work. I am not going there to work, I said. I am going there to close. The office at Sutter Ridge was quiet again. I looked at the NMLS screen one last time. Another state had flipped to pending. The map was turning red. It was a beautiful, terrible color. It was the color of consequences. The conference room at Sutter Ridge was a study in minimalism. There were no beanbag chairs, no ping-pong tables, and no motivational posters on the walls. There was only a long table made of reclaimed oak, comfortable leather chairs, and a secure video conferencing system that cost more than most cars. At 8 o'clock on Thursday morning, Mara Sutter and I sat facing the screen. On the other end, sitting in her Chicago office, was Evelyn Hart. She looked tired. The crispness of her blazer could not hide the shadows under her eyes. She was a woman who had $78 million in capital hanging in limbo. And for a bank executive, that is a physical sensation, like holding a grenade with the pin pulled out. Let us dispense with the pleasantries, Evelyn said. Her voice was tinny coming through the speakers, but the authority was clear. I have read the proposal from Bennett Compliance Systems. Mara has vouched for the entity. My legal team has reviewed the articles of incorporation and the insurance binders. On paper, it looks viable. It is operational, I said. Not just viable. Evelyn looked at me through the camera lens. Dylan Kessler promised me an AI-driven, instantaneous, frictionless compliance engine. He promised me the future. You are offering me... What exactly? Paisley. I am offering you friction, I said. Mara glanced at me, but she did not interrupt. She knew exactly what I was doing. I am offering you a team of 4 qualified analysts, I continued, keeping my voice level. I am offering you a manual review of every transaction over $10,000. I am offering you a 30-day onboarding period where nothing moves until the state regulators have physically stamped the approval. I am offering you a boring, slow, legally bulletproof shield. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. She took off her glasses. Dylan said the 30-day delay would kill our momentum, she said. Dylan is wrong, I replied. A 30-day delay is an inconvenience. A cease and desist order from the New York Department of Financial Services is a death sentence. You do not need speed. Evelyn, you need survival. You are about to integrate a massive payroll network into a system that is currently flagging false positives on its own sanctions list. You need someone to stand in front of the train and force it to slow down before it derails. Evelyn stayed silent for a long moment. She was calculating. She was weighing the sexy promise of tech against the cold reality of risk. Can you deliver the state credentials? Evelyn asked. Can you personally stand as the qualified individual for the money transmission licenses in all 50 states? I already have the approvals drafted, I said, because my LLC has been dormant but active in the NMLS system. The change of sponsorship is a notification process, not a new application. I can have the bond riders issued by my broker by noon today. I can have the state notifications filed by 2 in the afternoon. I can have you compliant in 48 hours, not months. Evelyn picked up a pen. She tapped it against her desk. Click, click, click. There is something I need to understand, Evelyn said. Our contract with Granite Harbor, it contains a very specific clause regarding the key compliance authority. My lawyers tell me it is unusual. Most vendor agreements verify the company, not a specific human being. Why is that clause there? I looked at the camera. I did not blink. Because I wrote it, I said. Evelyn stopped tapping the pen. You wrote it. 2 months ago, I explained. When Dylan sent me the draft to review, he told me to handle the boring stuff. He was focused on the revenue share and the marketing rights. He did not read the definitions section in Appendix C. I inserted the definition of key compliance authority to ensure that Redwood would never be exposed to an unqualified risk officer. I defined it as the specific individual holding the state credentials. I made the validity of the entire agreement contingent on that specific human failing to be employed. You built a kill switch, Evelyn said softly. I built a safety valve, I corrected. I knew that if Dylan ever decided to cut corners, he would start with my department. I wanted to make sure that if he cut me, he cut the cord to the money. I did it to protect the partner. I did it to protect you. Evelyn looked down at the document on her desk. She flipped to the back page. She was looking at the letter of intent that Dylan had signed with a flourish 3 weeks ago. And because Dylan signed this LOI, Evelyn said, following the logic, he agreed to the definitions, and because he fired you without cause and without a replacement, he triggered the immediate termination clause. Paragraph 14, Section B, I recited. In the event of the removal of the key compliance authority without prior written consent, Redwood Payroll Network reserves the right to terminate all negotiations and existing agreements immediately, without penalty, and without a cure period. Without a cure period, Evelyn repeated. That is the dagger. He did not read it, Evelyn, I said. He saw the $78 million and he signed. He thought the legal terms were just noise. Evelyn looked up. A small, cold smile touched her lips. It was the smile of a banker who realizes she has just dodged a bullet. He is arrogant, Evelyn said, and arrogance is a liability I cannot afford. She turned to someone off camera, presumably her corporate counsel. Draft the letter, Evelyn commanded. Terminate the letter of intent with Granite Harbor Financial effective immediately pursuant to paragraph 14. Cite the loss of the key compliance authority as the material breach. She turned back to the camera. And draft a new letter of intent, she added, for Bennett Compliance Systems, acting as the exclusive regulatory partner for the Redwood integration. Same terms, same revenue share, but the check goes to the LLC, not Granite Harbor. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands remained steady on the table. One condition, I said. Name it, Evelyn said. I want the transition to be handled in person, I said. We need access to the Granite Harbor historical data to migrate the compliance logs. I need you to demand a meeting at their headquarters. I want the termination and the new appointment to be delivered in the same room. You want to look him in the eye, Evelyn said. I need to secure the files, I said, keeping it professional. But yes, I want him to understand why he lost. Done, Evelyn said. I will have my assistant send the meeting invite for 11 o'clock this morning. We will tell them it is a crisis resolution meeting. We will tell them we found a solution. Thank you, Evelyn, I said. Do not thank me, Paisley, she replied. Just keep me out of jail. The screen went black. The connection was severed. Mara let out a long, low whistle. You just took a $78 million deal, Mara said, with a single definition in an appendix. I did not take it, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. I caught it. Dylan threw it away. At that exact moment, 3 miles away, the notification landed in the inbox of Dylan Kessler. I can picture it perfectly. He was likely huddled in the conference room with the crisis management team. They were probably debating whether they could bribe a state official or forge a document. The air in the room would be stale, smelling of cold coffee and fear. Then, the ping, Dylan would open it, expecting a reprieve. He would expect Evelyn to say she was giving them an extension. He would expect a lifeline. Instead, he read the subject line, Notice of Termination of Letter of Intent. He would read the first paragraph, pursuant to Section 14, immediate effect, failure to maintain key compliance authority, and then the second email would arrive. This one would be a calendar invitation. Subject transition of services, asset recovery. Location, Granite Harbor Boardroom. Attendees, Redwood Payroll Network. Granite Harbor Executive Team. Bennett Compliance Systems. He would stare at the words, Bennett Compliance Systems. He would see my name embedded in the corporate entity. For the first time in his life, the reality of the world would crash through the delusion of his ego. He would realize that the legacy employee he had mocked, the woman he had dismissed as a cost center, the dinosaur he had memed on Slack, was not beneath him. I was the landlord, and I was coming to evict him. I looked at Mara. She was already packing her briefcase. Ready? She asked. I picked up my phone. I saw the calendar notification pop up on my own screen. I have been ready for 14 years, I said. We walked out of the office and into the elevator. The descent was smooth. The doors opened to the lobby, and the bright morning sun of Charlotte hit us. It was a beautiful day. It was the kind of day where companies die and empires are born, all in the silence of a signed PDF. The $78 million had changed hands without a single dollar bill being moved. It had moved on the rails of logic. It had moved because one person read the contract, and the other person just looked at the price tag. Dylan Kessler had signed his own resignation letter the day he signed that contract. He just didn't know it until right now. The elevator ride to the 14th floor of the Granite Harbor building was silent. I stood next to Mara Sutter. We were reflected in the brushed steel doors, 2 women in dark suits standing as still as statues. I did not feel my heart racing. I did not feel the sweat of nervousness. I felt the absolute, crystalline clarity of a person who has already seen the end of the movie. When the doors slid open, the lobby was quieter than usual. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, who used to sneak me extra donuts on Fridays, looked up. Her eyes went wide. She reached for the phone, likely to warn Dylan, but Mara stepped forward. We are expected, Mara said. Her voice was not a request. Boardroom A, 11 o'clock. Sarah slowly put the phone down. She nodded. She knew. Everyone knew. The silence in the office was not peaceful. It was the silence of a held breath. We walked down the long corridor. I passed my old cubicle. It was dark. The monitors were black. The chair was pushed in. It looked like a tombstone. As we approached the glass walls of the main boardroom, I could see them. The blinds were drawn, but the slats were open just enough to see the shapes of the men inside. They looked like prisoners waiting for a verdict. We did not knock. Mara pushed the heavy glass door open, and we stepped inside. The air in the room was stale, recycled, and thick with the smell of anxiety. Graham Kessler sat at the head of the table. He looked as if he had aged 10 years in 2 days. His skin was gray. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he was staring at a spot on the table as if trying to burn a hole through the wood. Dylan sat to his right. He was vibrating. His leg was bouncing under the table, shaking the water pitcher. He was checking his phone, putting it down, picking it up again. When he saw me, he froze. A look of relief washed over his face, followed instantly by a look of fear when he saw Mara standing next to me. On the massive screen at the far end of the room, Evelyn Hart was dialed in from Chicago. Her face was grim. She was watching us like a judge from a high bench. Also present was Sterling, the crisis attorney. He looked bored. He knew a losing hand when he saw one. "You are late," Dylan said. It was a weak attempt at dominance. "We are exactly on time," I replied. 11 o'clock. I did not sit down. I walked to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table from Graham. Mara stood behind me, a silent sentinel. Just as the tension began to stretch into awkwardness, the door opened again. It was a courier. He was wearing a generic uniform and holding a thick red envelope. He did not look at anyone. He simply walked up to Graham, placed the envelope on the table, and said, "Service for Granite Harbor Financial." He turned and left. The latch of the door clicked shut. That click was the loudest sound in the world. Graham did not touch the envelope. He knew what it was. "Open it." Evelyn's voice came from the speakers. Dylan reached for it. His hands were shaking so badly he tore the flap. He pulled out the document. It was a formal notice from Redwood Payroll Network. "What does it say?" Graham asked. His voice was a whisper. Dylan read it. His face went pale. He swallowed hard. "It says," Dylan stammered. "It says they are issuing a stop work order. They are suspending the API integration effective immediately. They are demanding a full compliance audit before any funds can be released." He looked up at the screen. "Evelyn, we talked about this. We just need a few days to refile the paperwork. We can get a new signatory. I have a guy in legal who—" "Shut up," Graham said. It was not a scream. It was a low, guttural command. Graham finally looked up from the table. He looked at his son with a mixture of loathing and heartbreak. "Dad, I can fix this," Dylan pleaded, his voice rising in pitch. "We just need to submit the forms. It is just a state filing. We can pay the expedited fee." "There is no expedited fee for negligence," I said. My voice cut through his panic. Dylan snapped his head toward me. "You," he said, pointing a finger. "This is your fault. You left us high and dry. You abandoned your post." "I was fired," I said calmly. "In this room, 48 hours ago. You told me my work was a legacy function. You told me an AI could do it in 5 minutes. I was streamlining," Dylan shouted. "I was trying to make us efficient. And you sabotaged the system on your way out." "I did not touch the system," I said. "I simply took my name with me. That is the law. Dylan, you cannot drive a car with someone else's license." I reached into my bag. I pulled out a small stack of documents. I placed them on the table. First, I laid down a crisp, white business card. Bennett Compliance Systems, LLC, a Sutter Ridge partner. Dylan stared at it. "What is this?" "That is the new vendor of record for the Redwood Payroll Network," I said. Dylan laughed. It was a frantic, hysterical sound. You think Redwood is going to sign with a one-person shell company? We are Granite Harbor. We have the infrastructure. We have the code." "You have the code," I agreed. "But you do not have the keys." I placed the second document on the table. It was a service agreement. "This is a proposal," I said. Bennett compliance systems can restore your regulatory standing. We can file the interim authority notices within 1 hour. We can act as the third-party qualified individual for your licenses. We can turn the lights back on. Graham looked at the proposal. He saw the lifeline. We will sign it, Graham said immediately. Whatever the fee is, we will pay it. Just get the suspension lifted. There is a condition, I said. Name it, Graham said. The contract is not with Granite Harbor, I said. The contract is with Redwood directly. You will be a sub-vendor. You will provide the technology. I will provide the compliance. And the revenue share for the $78 million deal flows through my entity first. You are stealing the deal, Dylan screamed. He slammed his fist on the table. This is corporate theft. I will sue you. I will bury you. Sterling, Evelyn spoke from the screen. Please explain the situation to your client. The lawyer, Sterling, sighed. He leaned forward. Dylan, Sterling said softly, you signed a letter of intent that contained a specific clause regarding the key compliance authority. When you fired Ms. Bennett, you voided the contract. Redwood is free to walk away. They are not stealing the deal. They are reallocating it. But she planned this, Dylan insisted. She knew. She trapped me. I did not trap you. I said, I warned you. I placed the final document on the table. It was the twist of the knife. It was a printed copy of an email chain from 6 months ago. It was legally archived on the company server, but I had kept my own copy. Read the highlighted section, I said. Graham reached out. He took the paper from Dylan's freezing hands. He put on his reading glasses. He read aloud. From Paisley Bennett to Dylan Kessler. Subject risk alert. Person-bound credentials. Graham's voice wavered. Dylan, please be advised that the new Redwood contract definitions link the validity of the agreement to my specific credentials. If we automate the department without a formal transition period of at least 90 days, we will be in breach of contract and in violation of state money transmission laws. This is a critical dependency. Graham stopped. He looked at the next line. Response from Dylan Kessler. Graham went silent. He could not read it. He closed his eyes. Read it, I said. Graham pushed the paper toward the center of the table. I recited it from memory. TLDR. Don't be a blocker. Paisley. Nobody reads the fine print. Just get it done. Thumbs up emoji. The room was absolutely silent. The air conditioning hummed, indifferent to the destruction of a career. Dylan stared at the paper. The evidence of his arrogance was sitting there in black and white. He had not just made a mistake. He had been told, explicitly, that the bridge was out, and he had accelerated anyway because he thought the warning sign was ugly. You knew, Graham whispered. He looked at his son. She told you. It was just an email, Dylan whispered. It was just noise. It was the job, I said. I looked at Evelyn on the screen. She gave a curt nod. Granite Harbor, Evelyn said formally. Redwood is hereby exercising its right to terminate our direct engagement. We are entering into a new master agreement with Bennett Compliance Systems. If you wish to continue as a technology provider for the platform, you will negotiate your terms with Ms. Bennett directly. Graham slumped in his chair. He looked small. He looked defeated. We accept, Graham said. Dad, Dylan cried out. You cannot let her do this. She is an employee. She is the boss, Graham said. And you are done. Graham turned to his son. His eyes were cold. Pack your things, Dylan, Graham said. You are freed up. Dylan looked around the room. He looked at the lawyer, who looked away. He looked at Evelyn, who was checking her watch. He looked at me. He wanted to scream. He wanted to rage, but he had nothing left. The logic of the situation had crushed him. He had spent his life thinking that rules were for other people, that money could solve anything, that he was the smartest person in the room. Now, he realized he was the only person in the room who did not understand the game. I stood there, my hand resting on the proposal. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I will have the interim filings ready by noon, I said to Graham. My team will need access to the server room to audit the logs. You have full access, Graham said. Just, please, save the company. I am not saving the company, I said. I am saving the compliance. The company is up to you. I turned to leave. Mara opened the door for me. As I walked out, I heard the sound of Dylan Kessler crying. It was not a loud sob. It was the quiet, jagged breath of a man who has just watched his own reflection shatter. I walked back down the hallway, past the dark cubicles, past the empty break room. The lights in the office seemed dimmer now, or maybe my eyes were just adjusting to the brightness of the future. I had walked into that room as a ghost. I walked out as the owner of the reality they lived in, and all it took was one sentence, one signature, and the patience to let them prove me right. The voice of Evelyn Hart did not waver. It filled the boardroom, amplified by the expensive surround sound system that Dylan had installed to impress investors. But there were no investors left to impress. There was only the hollow echo of a deal disintegrating in real time. Let me be absolutely clear so there is no misunderstanding, Evelyn said, her face looming large on the screen. As of this moment, Redwood Payroll Network is formally rescinding all offers of partnership with Granite Harbor Financial. We are exercising our right to terminate negotiations based on the material breach of the Key Compliance Authority Clause. The $78 million capital allocation is hereby withdrawn. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of air leaving a balloon. Furthermore, Evelyn continued, shifting her gaze to me, we are immediately transferring the exclusivity of this agreement to Bennett Compliance Systems. Paisley Bennett will serve as the sole compliance authority for our integration. Granite Harbor is no longer a partner. You are, at best, a subcontractor for the technology layer, subject to Ms. Bennett's approval and audit. Graham Kessler turned his head slowly. He looked at his son. It was not a look of anger anymore. It was a look of total devastation. It was the look of a man watching his life's work burn down because his child decided to play with matches. "What have you done?" Graham whispered. The words were heavy, dropping like stones onto the mahogany table. "Dylan, what have you done?" Dylan sat frozen. His face was a mask of pale shock. He tried to speak, but his voice was thin and reedy. "I was trying to save money," Dylan stammered. "I was trying to modernize. She was just overhead. Dad, it was just a salary." I stepped forward. I placed my hands on the back of the empty chair at the end of the table. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The truth is loud enough on its own. "That is where you were wrong. Dylan," I said, "you did not fire me. You fired legal capacity. You treated a license like a subscription you could just cancel. You thought you were cutting a cost, but you were actually cutting the brake line on a speeding car." Sterling, the crisis attorney, finally closed his folder. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He knew the law. He knew what came next. "Mr. Kessler," Sterling said to Graham, his tone professional and detached. "We have a significant problem, with the Redwood deal terminated for cause, and with the state regulators now alerted to the lack of a qualified individual. We are in a position of extreme exposure. Every transaction we process from this moment forward could be construed as wire fraud or unlicensed money transmission." Graham looked at the lawyer. "What are you saying?" "I am saying we have to stop," Sterling said, "to mitigate the criminal liability for the board members, including yourself. We must cease operations immediately. We need to conduct a full compliance audit and trace every dollar moved in the last 48 hours. We cannot have employees accessing the system. We cannot have sales calls. We cannot have data moving." Graham looked at the HR director, Paige, who was standing by the door, clutching her clipboard to her chest. "Do it," Graham said. His voice broke. Paige looked terrified. "Do what?" "Sir?" "Shut it down," Graham said. "Send everyone home. Pause the badge access. Lock the servers to essential staff only. Shut the office down." The order went out 3 minutes later. I stood by the window and watched it happen. It was a surreal, Slow motion collapse. I saw the email notification pop up on Dylan's phone, which was lying face up on the table. Subject urgent. Office closure. Effective immediately. The Charlotte office is closed for an emergency operational audit. Please save your work. Log off and exit the building. Your badge access will be suspended until further notice. Through the glass walls of the boardroom, I could see the reaction on the floor. It started as a ripple of confusion. Heads popped up over cubicle walls. People looked at each other. Then, the murmuring started. Phones were picked up. Bags were packed. The lights in the open plan area began to flicker. The motion sensors were timing out as people stopped moving and started leaving. Dylan was staring at me. He looked at me as if I were holding a physical switch in my hand. He looked at me as if I could stop this. He wanted to beg. I could see the desperation forming in his throat. He wanted to ask me to sign something, anything, to make the nightmare stop, but he knew it was too late. There were no shortcuts left. The bridge was not just burned, it was at the bottom of the river. Graham stood up. He walked over to where I was standing. He looked old. He looked like a man who had realized too late that he had bet on the wrong horse. Paisley. Graham said, "Please, we can fix this. Come back. I will give you the title. Chief Risk Officer. I will match the Redwood deal. I will give you equity. 5% of the company. Just bring the license back in-house." I looked at him. I remembered the 14 years of missed birthdays. I remembered the late nights fixing his mistakes. I remembered the way he had looked at his phone while his son humiliated me in this very room just 2 days ago. "I do not want your equity, Graham," I said, "and I do not need your title. I already have a title. I am the CEO of Bennett Compliance Systems. It is about money," Graham pleaded. "It is always about money. Name your price." "It is not about money," I said. "It is about respect. I did not need you to recognize me today. I needed you to respect me before everything caught fire. You chose to listen to a boy who thought he knew better than the law. You made your choice." I turned away from him. I looked up at the screen. Evelyn Hart was still watching, a silent witness to the execution. "Evelyn," I said, "we have a lot of work to do. The transition will take time." "We have time," Evelyn said. "Where do we start?" "We start by doing it right," I said. "Not fast." "Right." "Agreed," Evelyn said. "I will see you in Chicago on Monday." "Paisley." The screen went black. The connection was cut. I picked up my bag. I picked up the proposal I had placed on the table. I did not leave it for them. They had not signed it yet, and my rates had just gone up. I walked toward the door. Dylan was still sitting at the table, his head in his hands. He was weeping softly. It was the sound of a child who has broken a toy he was told to be careful with. I walked out of the boardroom and into the hallway. The office was emptying fast. The sales team, usually so loud and brash, were filing out in silence, carrying boxes and plants. They looked at me as I passed. Some of them recognized me. They looked confused. They did not understand why the woman who was fired on Tuesday was walking out with her head high while the rest of them were being evicted. I walked past the server room. I could hear the hum of the cooling fans slowing down as the load decreased. The heart of the beast was going into hibernation. I reached the lobby. Sarah, the receptionist, was locking her desk. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Take care of yourself." "Sarah," I said softly. "Goodbye." "Paisley," she whispered. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the humid Charlotte afternoon. The sun was blinding after the dim light of the dying office. I turned around and looked up at the building one last time. It was a monolith of glass and steel, gleaming in the sun. But I knew the truth. Inside, the lights were going out, floor by floor. The energy was draining away. They thought they could automate the conscience of the company. They thought they could replace experience with an algorithm. They thought they could treat people like lines of code. I did not burn it down. I did not strike a match. I simply unplugged myself from the machine. And without the current of truth flowing through the wires, the machine did exactly what machines do when the power is cut. It stopped. I turned my back on Granite Harbor Financial. My car was waiting. I had a flight to Chicago to catch, and a $78 million portfolio to manage. The rearview mirror showed the building getting smaller and smaller, until it was just another gray shape in the distance, indistinguishable from all the other monuments to arrogance that littered the skyline. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please comment below with your city or country so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Boss Revenge Stories. Hit the like button and smash that hype button to help this story get heard by more people. Your support means the world to us.